You wake up in a room full of voices. The air is thick, heavy, as if the words of others consume all the oxygen. Laughter, stories, opinions firing without pause. But there's something else. Something that doesn't make a sound. Something watching you from the silence. And you feel it. It's not absence. It's presence. A presence that weighs more than all the noise around you. Someone is there, still, quiet, and their gaze pierces you like an invisible needle. They don't speak. They don't interrupt. But somehow, you feel that silence knows more about you than any word you've ever spoken. Why does silence disturb us so much? Because we're trained to read faces that talk, hands that gesture, lips that move. But when someone remains motionless, in absolute calm, there's nothing to read. And that terrifies us. Because silence doesn't reveal itself, doesn't defend, doesn't ask permission. Silence collects, while you speak to exist, to be seen, to prove you matter. Someone else is taking notes of your contradictions, of your fears disguised as confidence, of the cracks you don't even know you're showing. It's not weakness. It's strategy. It's patience. It's power in latent state. And in that moment you understand something dark. Those who speak the most rarely listen. But those who listen, they know exactly when to strike. Because true danger never announces its arrival. The room continues to breathe around you, but inside, something else is happening. Something no one sees. While they speak, you retreat, not because you're afraid, not because you have nothing to say, but because your mind has learned a different language, one that doesn't require sound. You watch. You watch the way her smile doesn't reach your eyes when she talks about her marriage. You notice how his voice rises half an octave when he mentions money. You catalog the micropause before someone agrees, that fraction of hesitation that betrays doubt. These details don't vanish. They sink into you, layer by layer, memory by memory. Your mind becomes an archive. While extroverts expend energy projecting themselves outward, you turn inward. And in that interior silence, something sharpens. Pattern recognition, behavioral prediction, the ability to see what people don't say, what they hide beneath performance. Every conversation becomes data. Every lie, a timestamp. Every contradiction, filed away for later. It's lonely. It's lonely. Because no one asks what you see. They don't wonder what you've noticed. They assume your silence means absence, emptiness, disconnection. But it's the opposite. You're hyper-connected, too connected. You see too much, feel too much, remember too much. And the weight of it presses down like stones on your chest. But here's what they don't understand. Silence isn't passivity. It's observation waiting to become action. It's a blade being sharpened in the dark. Every ignored moment, every dismissive glance, every time they spoke over you, it all gets stored, cataloged, remembered. And one day, when the moment is right, that archive becomes a weapon. And then you learn something the loud ones never will. Power doesn't announce itself. It never has. The ones who shout their strength are the ones who fear being tested. The ones who demand attention are starving for validation. But you learned early that visibility doesn't equal safety. It equals exposure. And exposure, in this world, invites violence. So you stayed quiet. Not out of fear, out of intelligence. You watched how hierarchies are built. Not through merit, but through performance. You saw how the cruelest people smile the widest. How institutions preach compassion while practicing cruelty behind closed doors. How society rewards those who lie convincingly, not those who tell the truth quietly. History teaches this lesson over and over. The assassins who changed empires weren't the ones who announced their plans in the forum. They were silent, patient, invisible. Foucault understood it. Power operates best when it's unseen, diffused, internalized. The panopticon doesn't need guards in every cell, just the belief that someone might be watching. And you became that presence, that silent, observing force no one can locate, but everyone can feel. Introverts don't project power. They simply understand it too well to waste it on display. Because true power isn't in making people look at you. It's in making them wonder what you know. It's in holding silence so heavy that others fill it with their own confessions, their own anxieties, their own guilt. You don't need to interrogate. You just wait. And they break themselves open trying to read you. The moment you understand this, something shifts. You stop trying to be seen. You stop apologizing for your silence. Because you've realized the most terrifying truth of all. The person who controls the silence controls the room, and no one even knows you're doing it. But let's not pretend it doesn't hurt, because it does. God, it does. Every time they spoke over you. Every time your words were swallowed by someone louder, someone more confident, someone who simply refused to make space. Every meeting where your ideas died in your throat because no one bothered to ask. Every room where you became furniture, present, but irrelevant. That violence is real. It's not loud. It doesn't leave bruises you can photograph. But it carves you hollow from the inside. Because being ignored isn't neutral. It's a message. It tells you you don't matter enough to acknowledge. And that message, repeated across years, across rooms, across relationships, it ferments. Your feelings don't disappear when you swallow them. They rot. They sit inside your chest like undigested weight. Shame, resentment, rage with nowhere to go. You smile when you're supposed to smile. You nod when you're supposed to nod. But underneath, something dark is growing. Words you never said begin to decay into bitterness. Emotions you compressed for the sake of peace begin to curdle into something toxic. And the worst part? No one notices. They see your silence and assume calm. They see your stillness and assume acceptance. But you're not calm. You're not at peace. You're a pressure chamber. And every dismissive glance, every interruption, every moment of being treated like background noise, it's another degree of heat. Silence doesn't erase pain. It concentrates it. It turns suffering inward, where it becomes dense, pressurized, volatile. And eventually, something has to give. Either you collapse under the weight of it, or you learn to weaponize it. But either way, the transformation has already begun, and there's no going back. And then it happens, the shift. The moment everything you've stored, everything you've swallowed, everything you've observed, it stops being a burden and becomes a blade. You stop defending your silence. You stop explaining yourself. You stop softening your presence to make others comfortable. Because you've realized something they haven't. The person who refuses to react holds all the cards. Silence becomes your weapon, not through aggression, not through confrontation, but through absence. You withhold what they expect. You don't fill awkward pauses. You don't rush to clarify misunderstandings. You don't offer reassurance when they're fishing for it. And that refusal, that quiet, deliberate withholding, it unravels them. Because people are terrified of what they can't read. They need reactions to calibrate their behavior. They need feedback to know if they've affected you. But when you give them nothing, when your face remains still, your tone neutral, your gaze steady and unrevealing, they spiral. They project. They confess things you never asked about. They expose their own insecurities, trying to provoke a response from you. And you just watch. You've become what Carl Jung warned about, the shadow they can't escape, the mirror they're too afraid to look into. Your silence forces them to confront themselves, and most people can't handle that. So they label you cold, unfeeling, detached, dangerous, even. But here's the truth. You're not dangerous because you're cruel. You're dangerous because you're patient, You know how to wait. You know how to listen until someone reveals the exact weakness you need. You know how to make people underestimate you, right up until the moment you prove them catastrophically wrong. Butler said identity is performance. But what happens when you stop performing? When you refuse to play the role they've assigned you? You become unreadable, unpredictable, untouchable. But the question remains, what happens when silence wins? But here's what no one tells you. The power you gain from silence, it comes with a price. Because once you master it, once you learn how to wield invisibility like armor, something else happens. You stop being seen, not just by others, by yourself, that you become so good at withholding, at observing without revealing, at controlling every reaction, that eventually you forget what it feels like to be known. Truly known. Not analyzed, not studied, but felt. Your silence protects you, but it also isolates you, because intimacy requires vulnerability. Connection requires exposure. And if you've spent years perfecting the art of being unreadable, how do you let someone in? How do you trust that showing your interior won't be used against you? You can't. So you don single quotes T dot, and slowly you realize you've become a ghost in your own life. Present but untouchable. Powerful but alone. You hold so much inside, observations, emotions, truths no one asked for, that the weight begins to hollow you out from within. Silence was supposed to be your weapon. But if you're not careful, it becomes your prison. Sartre said hell is other people. But maybe hell is this. Being so guarded, so self-contained, so perfectly controlled, that no one ever reaches you. Not even yourself. So here's the warning, whispered at the edge of this nightmare. Power without connection is just slow disappearance. Silence without release is just suffocation in disguise. You can win every psychological battle, outlast every loudmouth, outthink every room you enter. But if no one ever knows you, if you never let yourself be anything other than the watcher, then what, exactly, have you won? The silence remains, and it's watching you back.